Akechi is a catchy name. But anyways, time to talk about Akechi. Is Akechi a good character? Are the buffs to Akechi actually good? Is his 5-star weapon worth it? And finally, is he worth pulling? But as always, let's start with his kit first. For his A0, he will grant a mastermind to an ally with the highest attack, and he will prioritize the sweepers and assassin, so the DPS. At the start of each turn, you can manually select a target to be mastermind, but only one ally can have mastermind at any time, and there's also a 1-turn cooldown in selecting the mastermind. Then you increase Akechi's attack by 25% of the mastermind's attack up to 1000, and when an ally visits Akechi as mastermind and deals damage, all the damage sourced from the skill resonance highlight will be recorded by Akechi, and if it's an AoE, then it will take the average of the AoE attack. If it's a single target, it's going to record 40% of the damage. Then at the start of Akechi's turn, you gain 1 arrow of truth stack based on the recorded damage. When Akechi has mastermind, the effect of his skill 3 changes. An arrow of truth deals armor damage based on the skill multiplier of arrow of perjury. We will talk about that when we get to skill 3. Skill 1 is AoE blast attack that restores HP, and you get a blessing stack. You also gain suspicion, which is required to activate skill 3. And you also gain deduction for 2 turns. Deduction will increase the party's damage by 19.5%. Skill 2 is an AoE curse damage, and you also gain suspicion for the skill 3, and you gain stratagem for 2 turns. Stratagem will decrease all the foe's defense by 25.4%, and you increase the skill 3 hit by 1, and also increase the damage dealt by the skill 3. The skill 3 must be activated by a suspicion, so you need to use the skill 1 or skill 2 first. Then you spend all the arrow or truth stacks to deal a fixed amount of armor damage to all the foes based on the recorded damage. Then you activate arrow of perjury on random foes. So this is the second tick of damage. The first tick is from recorded damage, second tick is from this. It's 4 hits, and you will prioritize different targets. If it hits the same target, you will do decreased damage. If Akechi is the one that has mastermind, so if you're using Akechi as main DPS, the arrow of truth gains 240% of the armor damage. Basically, this part gets replaced by this part, which will do more damage. This highlight is an AoE blast and also curse attack. Then for 4 turns, the skill 3 will do 2 more hits. But for specific, activate Flames of Desire effect with anybody on the team. And for each Flame of Desire stack, you increase by 15%, so this one can go up to 45. Or maybe even 60% if you're using First Kelmon, because First Kelmon is counted both as a wind and ice. The second passive, the more defense debuff you have, the more of the almighty damage will do. Up to 120% damage increase, so this one is going to be 240% debuff. His 4-star weapon increases almighty damage, and then you also increase attack. His 5-star weapon increases attack, and it will increase party's attack if you have either deduction or stratagem. Then when an ally mastermind activates a skill, highlight or resonance, increase Akechi's crit damage by 15% for 2 turns stacked up to 2 times. So this one can be up to 30%, which is pretty big. With A1, at the start of battle, you gain deduction, which is the skill 1. The duration of deduction and stratagem are extended to 4 turns. Also, when deduction and stratagem are both active, you increase Akechi's crit rate by 16%, and increases the damage of Akechi and mastermind by 25%. So A1 changes his skill rotation a bit, because skill 1 and skill 2 can actually have 100% uptime, since it lasts for 4 turns now. It's A2, when you do damage with a skill, and if the attribute of the last skill used was different, you increase the attack of Akechi and mastermind by 25%, and also crit damage by 30%, that's for 1 turn. For A4, after using the highlight, you increase the damage of skill 3 by 30% more for 4 turns. For A6, when you use the skill 3, the recorded damage will increase by 50%. Previously it was 19.5, now it's 50. Everybody on the team will be considered to have the mastermind effect, and during the battle, increase Akechi's crit rate and crit damage even more, and this increase is equal to 40% of the crit rate of the mastermind ally with the highest crit, and 40% of the highest crit multiplier exceeding 100%, up to maximum of 20% crit rate and 40% crit damage. For his cards, he can run 3 different sets. The first set is for the DPS, it's going to be Freedom and Disappointment. This set is good for DPS because it increases crit rate, increases attack damage. The other 2 sets are going to be for sub-DPS. The first one is going to be Departure Prosperity. This one is usually the safe card to get, especially when you need the highlight, right? Prosperity gives you a highlight charge, allows you to use 4 highlights in 6 turns. If you don't need this, but you need defense debuff, you can also run Departure Control. But just a reminder that Departure Control is only single target. So if you're using AoE, you just run Departure Prosperity. As for rotation, A0 Akechi main DPS is gonna be 2-3, and you repeat. The reason for this is because the skill 2 can increase the number of hits by 1, so you'll do more damage. But for the sub-DPS though, it kinda depends a little bit. Sub-DPS, if you're using Kasumi team, you run 2-1-3. It's because Kasumi only attacks like 4 out of 6 turns. So you can afford to drop a skill 3 and you stack the skill 2 and skill 1 buff. Outside of Kasumi team, you can either do 2-3 or 1-3. Depending on whether or not you need a defense debuff. If you're A1 Akechi, it becomes super straightforward. It's going to be 2-3, 1-3, 2-3. The reason for this is because at A1, Akechi's skill 1 and skill 2 last for 4 turns, so it allows you to have 100% uptime on both the skill 1 and skill 2. Now for a team, if you're running main DPS Akechi, pretty much any buff works, but the best ones is gonna be Tempest Wind and the Twins strategies. I know Twin strategies has the PS rate, which is not useful for Akechi, but just remember that Twins buff everything. So while the PS rate is useless, they buff attack, they buff damage, they buff crit damage, they buff everything. So the Twins are still pretty good for Akechi, but I think Tempest Wind overall is a little bit better because Tempest Wind buffs everything Akechi wants. Crit rate, crit damage, attack. The Navigator, I guess it really depends. Futaba I guess works, but just reminder that Futaba's skill 1 is half because Akechi cannot do weakness damage. So it's going to be 30+% defense debuff. If you're Phoebe, you can also use her, or regular Wind works also, but if you run regular Wind, you cannot run Tempest Wind. It depends on what you need. For Dagger, the best one for main DPS Akechi is going to be Plasma Blade, because Akechi can easily activate this dagger to max because of the Flames of Desire. So Persona, just run a typical buff persona like the Rebellion Revolution from Dionysus. If you need defense debuff, Cert is also nice if you have extra slot. And that's really it. These two are the main ones. If you don't have access to these two, because you use them on the other side, you can just run like Jokuten, maybe even Throne for the buff, damage buff, or even Dominion also, because Akechi can do good damage with the skill. Now if you're running sub-DPS Akechi though, yeah, don't run sub-DPS Akechi unless you're forced to. I'll talk about it more in a future section. So here's the interesting thing. Akechi's 5-star weapon got an indirect buff from the global buffs that Akechi got, which is, being able to use him as a main DPS. And the reason for that is because main DPS Akechi is going to do more damage, it's going to contribute more to the team, and hence the 5-star weapon is better, and the result shows. 20%, I will average it to 20% damage increase, which is actually at this point is going to be like average now for main DPS. And for sub DPS only like 5%. And I can already say sub DPS is worse because sub DPS Akechi is only going to contribute a small amount of percentage in the overall fight or overall score, because the main damage dealer is your main DPS, not your sub DPS. But to be fair, if you pull for Akechi, you're most likely going to use him as main DPS quite often. So overall I think it's worth it to get the weapon because the increase is pretty good. But how does Akechi compare to the Twins as sweepers? They are both almighty characters, so it's going to be a good idea to compare them. Twins, I sadly do not have A1 Twins, so I can only compare to A0 Twins. So the first thing you'll notice is that there's a huge increase here, 100%, 100%, so it's more than double. So these two are Tempest Wind team. This one is Turbo team, this one is Cord. So why is Turbo and Cord worse than Tempest Wind? You need to know the main source of damage from Akechi and Twins. Akechi's main source damage is from the skill 3. Meanwhile for the Twins, especially for A0, it's going to be from the highlight. With that knowledge, Cord is worse than Akechi. Cord is worse than Akechi because Akechi does less highlight damage, right? And remember that Twins highlight can crit, so the highlight does more damage. And Turbo is not as effective for Akechi because skill 3 Almighty already bypasses defense. While the Twin skill 3 also bypasses defense, their highlight does not. So the PS rate is still going to buff the Twins highlight. I don't know exactly how much better A0 Akechi is compared to A1 Twins, but I heard many people say that Akechi is still better, and I definitely believe them because the numbers here already show a pretty big difference, and I don't think A1 Twins can close that gap. Is it worth it to use Akechi as a sub DPS over a dedicated buffer? I'm sure all of you already know the answer to this, but to double confirm, I did a simple test. I used these two teams for the Nexus of Dreams guild boss. The only difference is Akechi and Turbo. This was quite an interesting test actually, because the team with Akechi will have 2 times multiplier because there's 3 DPSs, while Turbo team will only have 1.8 times multiplier. So technically, Akechi has a slight edge. So what does the result show? Turbo is still 38% better than Akechi. And I'm also using Turbo and not like Tempest Wind or Twins, who is likely gonna do even more and increase this gap even more, because Frascamont prefers Twins or Tempest Wind. So this test pretty much confirms that Akechi is pretty bad as a sub DPS, and don't use him as sub DPS unless you're forced to, like the Nexus of Dreams. So now onto the section where I talk about my experience with using Akechi, what I like, what I dislike, what's the good, the bad of Akechi, or any nitpick that I have with him. So let's start with the negative first. I have a couple. The first one, I already talked about it in the last section. Sub DPS Akechi, while kinda cool on paper, sucks. You won't really use sub DPS Akechi unless you're forced to, like Nexus of Dreams. You will never use sub DPS over an actual buffer. Another reason that I haven't pointed out why he sucks at sub-DPS is that his highlight is not useful for the team. His highlight is only for his own personal damage, which he don't really do much as a sub-DPS, so it basically lacks a supporting highlight that buffs the party's damage. The second thing is a rather minor thing, is that you cannot run creation and reconciliation set on Akechi. The reason is because it increases speed by 6, and if you run a sub-DPS Akechi, you want him to be the last to move, so he can record the damage. But this is quite a small problem because you can just run Departure Prosperity. Now onto the good stuff. I do quite a few good stuff actually. The first one is skill 1. The skill 1 is quite nice when you want to run sustainers, because it can heal a small amount of HP. And honestly, right, Akechi's pull value technically and arguably increase, because not only does he retain his niche as a sub-DPS or Nexus of Dreams, he can now also do good damage as a main DPS. Basically becomes like 2 in 1. Not as crazy as twins like 5 in 1, but that's pretty nice. And the final thing I want to say about him is that he is not restricted in team building. He doesn't need a specific character to work well, he doesn't need Matoi, he doesn't need element accuracy, he doesn't need burn. He just works out of the box. You pull for him, he can just work with any support you have. He has the ability to do good damage. He can also be used against literally any boss, because he's Almighty doesn't give a crap about weakness, so that's a bonus. So finally, to answer, should you pull Goro Akechi? Akechi's buffs are much better than what people gave him credit for. He's actually a pretty good character now. That being said, he's still not a character that I would really suggest anyone to pull. A reminder that a meta breaking character is going to come in a few days time. If you already have A1 twins and a number of other strong sweepers like Haru or Firecracker Rin, I would really suggest skipping Akechi. 4 out of 10. However, if you don't have A1 twins and you're struggling with AoE content, he is definitely not a bad pickup. It will definitely help out your con a lot. And the fact that he doesn't require much to do big damage is a bonus. And he can be used against any boss, because Almighty hits everything for neutral. But the final pull rating for Akechi is 7 out of 10.